Right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is this post. This is just a post on Twitter by a gender critical person from the UK. She's not particularly like a big gender critical person. I just happened to see this when scrolling through Blue Sky, someone responding to this, and I recognized her. And I thought what she was talking about was kind of ironic and interesting, and I want to talk about it. So she's quote tweeting Megan Murphy here. So Megan Murphy, who's quote tweeting Libs of TikTok. So there's a little chain here. Here is Libs of TikTok, who is just a right-wing, anti-feminist, like openly anti-gay marriage, anti-LGBT in full, like a full-on, like today's American Republican fascist type. Horrible person, very clearly anti-trans, but also very clearly anti-abortion, anti-every, the standard mix. And the next layer up, we have Megan Murphy, and she's saying, special shout out to the women, although it seems to be mainly men who oppose LGBT rights, but the women who risked it all to speak about this long before it was cool to do so. Your bravery will not be forgotten by those of us who are in the trenches. And Megan Murphy is an example of one of the earlier people from the gender critical movement, and she was someone who pretended to be a feminist, but seems to have given up on that in the last 4 years or something. But like her thing was she tried to create this like hands across the aisle group in Canada. I think she's Canadian. I'm pretty sure she's Canadian. Yeah. In Canada, which was like right wing and left wing feminists who came together against the trans menace or whatever. And yeah, and she's not that much different to Chea Rychik, who's Lips of TikTok. But importantly, she used to pretend to be very different. She used to pretend to be better. And then we've got here Harvey Jenny. I guess her name is just Jenny, but we'll call her Harvey because that's what she's put here. She's definitely one of the UK brands, gender criticals, who still does pretend to be like led by feminism against trans people, but is gender critical and just talks about trans people. She says, I was one of those women who was in the trenches risking it all, who could not see women's rights undermined, our scant resources taken, our feminist movement turned inside out. I risked and lost a lot. I wonder. I feel like when most gender critical people say they risked and lost a lot, what they really mean is a bunch of their like book club friends no longer talk to them because they realise that they're horribly bigoted. But she says, and I've watched as the GC movement, the gender critical movement, morphed into everything the TRAs, that's trans rights activists, that's me, said it was, as women champion rapists and racists, just because they will be clear about who exactly the women are while they set about destroying our freedoms. It's a horrible spectacle, and now I've lost my faith twice. Once when I lost so much for refusing to pretend male people were female, twice when I see what this movement and so many of the women in it have become. I'll leave you to big up the men doing Nazi salutes and banning abortion. Feminism will continue without you. The reason I thought this was like worth talking about is when I first came out, I was under the like very simple view of the world where like there are homophobes and transphobes, they're idiots, they're bad, and their reasoning is I'm homophobic, I'm transphobic, I'm just irrationally prejudiced against trans people, and that's why I oppose your rights. And then when I engaged in arguing about stuff on Twitter, I found the gender critical movement, and they were at least explaining themselves in a way where they were like, oh no, actually we're feminists, we don't just irrationally oppose this, we have all these like rationales and arguments from first principles and all this kind of stuff, and it's at least laid out more like a sort of skeptically or compatible with skeptical position. And so I genuinely, I'm sure that them watching this now will disagree, but that's because they're wrong and they're just going on gut reaction. I genuinely delved into gender critical to see if it was true, because it was new information to me and I wanted to know well, I want to know what's true. Like, I am a skeptic at heart. That is my core position. That is how I came to being an atheist. It's how I came to being pro-gay marriage and pro-gay rights in general. And it's how I came to being pro-trans rights. And finally, it's how I came to come out. But now I do encounter this new thing, which, at least to a complete layman approaching it, was like, okay, well, this isn't necessarily instantly false in the same way that, like, Westboro Baptist's position on gay people is instantly and obviously false. And so I was talking to a bunch of the gender criticals in DMs and arguing with them on Twitter. Sometimes they would say things where I didn't really have a response to it because I didn't know yet, but they would say other things that I did, and I'd be like, okay, well, they're wrong on this, but this other thing I need to investigate more. Harvey Jenny, or Gappy Tales, was one of the first people that I encountered from this gender critical movement where I saw, like, through it and realized that it was what my original view of it, like my original reaction on transphobia was true. Like, she had written something like, and this isn't a direct quote, don't sue me. She wrote something like, cis women, she obviously didn't say cis, she said, real women have to work so hard to be recognized for any achievement at all, but trans women don't have to. They just get it for free. Or something like that. And it was basically the standard conservative man argument of men have to work really hard, but women get it for free, or white people have to work really hard, but people of color get it for free. Like, it's this DEI higher thing that's going on in America now. It's political correctness gone mad, which was happening when I was like a teenager. It's wokeism gone mad of today. It was just so obviously the same argument. And also it just seemed to be coming from like a place of emotional, like, frustration. Like, how she saw the world was, I mean, I don't know how any of the people like this see the world, like how they can see the world like this when the reality and facts are just completely 180 polar opposite to how they feel about it. But what they feel is that trans people get everything for free, black people get everything for free, women get everything for free. And to be someone claiming to be a feminist and claiming to come to trans rights from this like feminist position, to just be saying the exact same thing that the anti-feminists are saying about women, but just, you know, with the words find and replaced. I was just like, wow, that you're just the same. You might have a little like charade that you play which hides your feelings and your intentions and your real motivations, but it was all just the same. It's just performance. It's not like I believe one thing and then I saw this one post and changed my mind. It was like the first crack. It was the first time when I saw someone from this like pretending to be feminist gender critical movement say something so obviously not what any feminist would ever come out with, because they would have seen this exact pattern 1,000 times. I was just like, well, this is ridiculous. And I remember like messaging some of the other gender critical people I was talking to and like, what the fuck is this? Like, surely you realize what this is. And they were like, she's right. I was like, oh, okay. Right, okay. Interesting. But what the trans people who had been doing it longer than me at the time, this was like 10 years ago, what the trans people who had been on the front lines for longer than I had were saying at the time was the gender criticals are just another right-wing anti-feminist movement, and they've just tried to wrap it up in the language of feminism to hide what they're doing. And they're going to, you know, they're promoting the homophobes, they're promoting the sexists, they're making excuses for these people who are otherwise horrible people just because they support trans people. That was already like common knowledge in the trans movement over 10 years ago, decades ago. And I think it's when I approached it, it's not like I had some kind of arrogance of like, oh, the other trans people are wrong. It was, okay, I've listened to what the trans people are saying. I'm also going to listen to what the gender critical people are saying and try and approach this skeptically, which I did, and which is how I've ended up in my current position. And I do think I genuinely, strongly assert that the only possible position that a skeptic who genuinely analyzes the turf wars can come to is the pro-trans rights position, just in the same way that the only possible skeptical position someone can come to on religion is the atheist position. Yeah, people had already seen through this. This was already common knowledge. Like, she's watched as the gender critical movement has become everything the trans rights activists said it was. I mean, okay, they're more open about it now, but it already was these things. Like, they were already making excuses for rapists and racists. They were already promoting right-wing people. They, for example, Harvey Jenny were already making very clearly anti-feminist talking points, just copy and pasted and replaced for another thing. It's just... It's ironic that this is what she's complaining about when she's like, for me, the example of this. But also so infuriating because, I mean, obviously from her post saying like, I'm sick of it, I'll leave you to it, she still views herself as some kind of feminist and is frustrated at the mainstream gender critical movement, but it's still like clearly, you know, holding gender critical views, is anti-trans. It's so frustrating for them to get to the point where they're like, okay, you know what, trans people, you were right about everything, but you're still wrong. It's like, open your fucking mind, mate. Like, approach this like a skeptic and stop, like, glugging down propaganda every single day and realize that maybe if 99.9% of the people on the gender critical team turned out to actually just be conservatives who think libs of TikTok is cool, like Meghan Murphy, and if all the other things we've pointed out are true, maybe some of the arguments we're making, or all of them, are true, and all of the anti-trans arguments that all you guys have been making are all a load of rubbish. So it's, yeah, very frustrating. But I don't think she's capable of changing her mind on this issue because she's been in this position for a decade, and they've had their little internal complaints about the movement becoming more and more openly fascist for a while, and it doesn't seem to have... I mean, this is like hardly the first sign, is it? I mean, the gender critical movement's been openly supportive of libs of TikTok and the Republicans and Posey Parker and all those wackos for ages. That is the GC movement. That's what it is. And Harvey Jenny is like a tiny little reminder of what it once pretended to be, but nothing else. She's just one of many gender criticals that I have encountered who just keep saying these things. I mean, she probably still looks at J.K. Rowling as like, well, at least the feminist at the top is still in charge, and J.K. Rowling's fine with all this libs of TikTok bullshit. It's like she's never complaining about it. That's what the movement is. That's the whole movement. And if you're a gender critical person watching this and you're like, well, okay, I agree that the mainstream gender critical movement has lost its way, but we still have some good ideas, or I still believe that trans people shouldn't have rights or something. You believe that because of things you incorrectly and prejudicially, can't remember the word, believe about trans people, and because you've just bought into a load of bullshit right-wing propaganda. The same, when you read the newspapers and they're writing all this horrible stuff about immigrants, and you're like, but my colleague, my partner, my friend is an immigrant, this is obviously propaganda. How do people fall for this? You are the kind of person who falls for that exact same propaganda, just about another minority that you don't know anything about. You're identical. And the people who are the racists who are saying that we shouldn't have immigrants in the country because they've never met an immigrant or they don't realize when they have, they also believe that they have this internally consistent worldview, and when they get pressured on it about something that doesn't quite make sense in it, they too just drop into thought-terminating cliches and turn off and stop rationally analysing things. When someone says, okay, what is the binary definition of sex? If you just retreat to, oh, well, I'm sure someone knows one, these trans people are science deniers, blah, blah, blah. That is you turning off and not being a skeptic on your position, not really following it through because you're scared that if you do, you'll come to the realization that we weren't just right about how all the fucking Nazis are gender critical and the gender critical movement seems to have no problem with them. We were also right about all of the core gender critical beliefs. All of them are wrong.